This is the Finance Brief. Be sure to subscribe, give us a like, share with a friend, and tap the bell so you never miss an episode.
We are diving deep today into a story that, well, it starts with all the drama of Hollywood, but it ends up squarely in the halls of Washington, D.C.
Exactly.
Forget the box office for a second. We're talking about the fight for one of the most, culturally significant media empires on the planet, Warner Bros. Discovery.
Right. And WBD, it's the parent company of HBO, so you've got all that prestige television.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the Warner Bros. Movie studio, and maybe most critically for this whole story, CNN, a massive global news operation.
The value there is it's not just financial, is it? It's about influence, it's about narrative.
It's all about cultural influence.
So the stage for this whole fight was set by Paramount's Guidance Corps. They launched this just staggering hostile takeover bid.
The number is almost hard to comprehend. $77.9 billion.
We bought a small nation territory. And as soon as that offer lands, the corporate maneuvering starts. And a tiny detail, like a footnote in an SEC filing, suddenly reveals the true stakes of global power politics.
Yeah, the initial drama was sort of who's going to win? Is it Paramount? Are there rival bidders? But the real twist, the seismic shift, was the sudden withdrawal of a major financial backer for that bid.
The Chinese tech and social media giant, Tencent Holdings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's unpack this. Tencent. This is a company with, over a $700 billion market cap. They're ready to put capital into this deal, and then just, poof, they pull the plug.
And the why is the key. It wasn't the valuation. It wasn't a better offer somewhere else. It was really a preemptive surrender to a very powerful U.S. national security force.
And that's our deep dive mission today, to understand how the mere shadow of this one American government body, CFIUS, can force a global giant like Tencent to just walk away from $1 billion commitment.
This is where high finance smacks right into geopolitical reality.
Okay, so let's nail down the specifics of the bid first, because I think the numbers really underscore the gravity of Tencent's exit.
Right.
Paramount's hostile offer for Warner Bros. Discovery is $77.9 billion.
Yeah.
A deal of that size, it needs incredibly deep, diverse pools of capital.
And Tencent was supposed to be a key part of that. A subsequent filing with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, confirmed it. Tencent dropped a specific $1 billion equity financing commitment.
$1 billion. Just gone from the financing structure almost overnight.
Evaporated.
But what's really crucial here is the reason Paramount gave in that filing. They said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Tencent's participation was a concern. Why? Because it was a non-U.S. equity financing source that could subject the entire bid, the whole $77.9 billion deal, to a review by CFIUS.
And that's the fascinating part. Formal approval by CFIUS or even the FCC was not a condition of the original bid.
So they didn't even have to get it.
No. The lawyers, the bankers, they just saw the writing on the wall. They calculated the risk and decided that losing $1 billion was actually cheaper than the cost and the uncertainty of a full-blown national security investigation.
That makes perfect sense from a corporate strategy perspective. A CFIUS review, it's not just an inconvenience, right? It can drag on for months.
Oh, months. And that uncertainty can tank a deal far more effectively than any competing bid ever could.
So the threat itself became the ultimate poison pill.
Exactly. When you look at the potential fallout, you see why they ran. So for anyone who isn't, steeped in global M&A law, what is CFIUS?
Right.
It stands for the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. It's an interagency group chaired by the Treasury Secretary, and its only job is to look at mergers and foreign investments for national security reasons.
It sounds like, a typical bureaucratic oversight group, but it seems to have this terrifying reputation. What gives it so much teeth?
Its power is, it's pretty much absolute in this sphere. CFIUS can intervene, and it can mandate remedies. That can be anything from forcing changes in who's on the board to outright demanding a company sell off a sensitive U.S. asset.
So wait, they don't just fine you or hold things up. They can actually reverse a massive multi-billion-dollar transaction after it's already done.
They absolutely can. The most famous recent example, I think, really involved user data. Back in 2019, a Chinese company, Beijing Kunlun Tech, was forced to sell Grindr, the dating app.
Wow. Okay.
Why? CFIUS decided that the massive amount of personal data Grindr had on U.S. citizens was a national security threat if it was in the hands of a company with ties to China. Kunlun had to completely sell the asset, a huge forced divestment.
That really brings it home. It shows that national security isn't just about satellites and defense contracts anymore.
No.
It's about data, information, and influence. And this oversight, it's only gotten stronger over time, hasn't it?
Absolutely. The trend is clear, and it's bipartisan. Under both former President Trump and President Biden, the Treasury has been actively strengthening CFIUS's powers. The focus has sharpened a lot on areas like, critical infrastructure, sensitive personal data, and highly relevant here, media and information.
The regulatory heat is just turned way up.
It is. It's much higher than it was a decade ago.
Which brings us right to the elephant in the room, Tencent. Why does $1 billion from Tencent trigger this level of panic, while, as we're going to see, much larger sums from other foreign countries are okay?
Well, it centers on the alleged ties. The U.S. Defense Department has placed Tencent on a public list of companies it says have ties to China's military.
And I assume Tencent denies that.
Vigorously. They're
Yeah.
listed in Hong Kong. They deny the claim.
But the denial doesn't really matter to a CFIUS regulator, does it? Just being on that list carries enormous weight.
It does. It's not just some internal Pentagon advisory. Being on that list immediately creates these very specific, very restrictive investment rules designed to stop U.S. capital from flowing to these companies. It essentially blacklists their money for certain strategic deals.
If we connect this to the bigger picture then, once you have that link, you combine it with the size and influence of Tencent, their involvement in WBD, which, again, owns CNN, becomes a five-alarm fire.
Let's talk about that scale for a second. Tencent is based in Shenzhen, which is China's main tech and financial hub. Their market cap, as you said, makes them one of the wealthiest companies in the world. But their footprint in the U.S. is not just financial.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They're the world's largest equity investor in online games. I mean, think about their ownership of Riot Games.
The developer of League of Legends.
Right, and that's not just a fun video game company.
No, it's a massive pipeline of data. Riot Games holds huge amounts of PII, personally identifiable information, on millions of young American gamers. Payment details, communications, behavioral data.
And that kind of widespread data collection on U.S. citizens is exactly what CFIUS is focused on protecting now.
It's the new frontier of national security.
And it's not just gaming. Tencent has a major streaming deal with the NBA, the National Basketball Association. That links them directly to one of America's biggest cultural exports.
And, of course, their cornerstone platform, WeChat. It's the dominant messaging and payment service, not just in China, but for Chinese citizens and immigrants all over the world, including here in the U.S.
So if you're a regulator, you look at this cocktail, alleged military ties, social media dominance, gaming data, and you see Tencent getting integrated into a major U.S. news network like CNN.
The potential for influence, or just the risk of data compromise, it just becomes too large to ignore. That's what made that $1 billion so radioactive.
That sets up a really fascinating contrast, though, because the SEC filing showed that while Tencent is out, the Paramount bid is still relying on massive foreign financing from other places.
Right.
Which brings us to this tale of two foreign investors.
Indeed. You have the $1 billion Chinese exit, and then you contrast that with a staggering $24 billion commitment from sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East.
$24 billion. So funds from Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar are putting in 24 times what Tencent was offering. So if the regulatory tripwire is just being a non-U.S. equity financing source, why are these Gulf sovereign funds able to inject $24 billion into WBD without causing the same panic?
This raises an important question, right? It's about control versus capital. And the source material gives us the exact answer. The Gulf funds agreed to a very specific structural concession. It was designed explicitly to avoid this kind of deep scrutiny.
And what was that concession?
They agreed to give up any and all right to participate in Warner Bros. Management.
So that's the distinction, operational control. So when we say management rights, what does that actually mean? They give up board seats, veto power.
All of it. They've ceded control over the entire strategic direction of the company. In practical terms, that means no representation on the board, no operational input, no veto rights over big corporate decisions, or, crucially, editorial decisions.
So their money is completely passive.
Completely. They're effectively silent partners. They provide the liquidity, but they have zero say in what CNN broadcasts or what HBO decides to produce.
And this really shows you the new playbook for global M&A, doesn't it? Chinese investment. Because of all this geopolitical friction and that DoD list, it comes with an assumption of seeking influence.
Which triggers maximum scrutiny.
Right. But the Gulf funds, they managed to bypass that by making that concession right up front. They agreed to be just money.
It highlights a key lesson for anyone watching global investment. When the asset you're buying is sensitive, like a major news organization, the U.S. government, through CFIUS, has basically dictated the price of admission for foreign capital. You can bring your billions, but you have to keep your hands off the steering wheel.
But hold on, if the goal is strictly to prevent foreign influence, isn't $24 billion from the Gulf even passive, potentially more influential than $1 billion from China, regardless of the control rules? How do they balance the sheer size of the capital versus the source country?
That's the nuance that CFIUS has to navigate. And while $24 billion is massive, the sovereign wealth funds, they're from long-term, established U.S. partners. They carry a different risk profile than a company explicitly listed by the DoD as being tied to a strategic rival.
Okay, so history and alliances matter.
They matter a lot. Plus, by formally giving up all control, the funds showed a clear intent to just be passive investors. Now, if Tencent had offered the same no-control deal, maybe it would have been different. But their profile, their regulatory history, it suggested a greater risk of wanting active involvement, or at least that's how the regulators perceived it.
So the key takeaway here is almost profoundly simple. The threat of CFIUS is the ultimate corporate bogeyman.
It absolutely is.
The mere possibility of getting caught in their crosshairs is enough to make $1 billion just vanish. The structure of the deal, who gets to influence the asset, is now way more important than how much money is being offered.
Exactly. The system is designed to allow major foreign capital to still play a role in these huge U.S. media deals, but with very strict controls. The price of entry, especially in these sensitive sectors, is the complete surrender of influence.
And this shift in strategy, it sets up a pretty complicated future for Hollywood, I think. Major studios clearly need these massive injections of foreign investment to survive, to fight the streaming wars.
They do. The capital has to come from somewhere.
Yet the U.S. government is tightening the screws, demanding that this capital gives up all management control.
It creates a paradox. You need the billions to compete, but the people providing those billions can't be trusted with any say in what you do.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. If the capital that keeps these essential American media powerhouses afloat has to be entirely passive, what does that dependence on outside money, combined with a total lack of influence on the board, truly mean for the future content, the long-term vision, and, I guess, the editorial independence of these studios? Does purely passive foreign ownership still carry some kind of unseen risk, or is that structural concession really enough to safeguard the future of U.S. media?
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks for spending your time with us. Don't forget to hit subscribe, tap the bell so you never miss a conversation, and drop a like if you enjoyed the show. We've got plenty more coming your way. Stay inspired, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next one.